Welcome back to another episode of Between Drafts. I'm Nat,
Nathan?
and today we're going to be talking about how to get or how to attempt to get an agent for a fiction book based on Nathan's querying process from a few years ago, going through this the first time, everything he learned going through it, and what he's doing differently this time, because you're going to start querying in a couple weeks.
Yeah. So
Hell yeah.
hopefully it goes better this time around.
Yeah. So I think we'll do the same thing as last week when we're talking about my process. You'll lead and drive, and I'll ask questions along the way. And I think it'll be really valuable for anyone who either is curious how this process works or wants to do it themselves.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So let's see, where should we start with this? So when did you try to do this?
End of 2020, early 2021.
Okay.
So before I started writing online or anything like that, the book that I wrote was technically be called like upper middle grade towards young adults.
Okay.
So it's very different than what I'm writing now. What I'm writing now is definitely adult fantasy. This was for a younger audience, but the process of maybe not writing the book, but the process of trying to get a literary agent and get it published is very similar.
Very similar. What does upper middle grade mean? Is that like middle school, high school?
Yeah.
Okay. And then young adult is what, 18 to 22?
Roughly. I
Okay.
think more and more the lines are getting blurred. Now you have young adult, you have new adult, you have adult, and it's just how you want to market your book and put it into the marketplace and how you want to present it to agents and editors.
Got it.
Sometimes different categories there will be hotter than others. So if you can fit into a hotter category, I think that's probably better. For example, for the current one I'm working on, definitely went adult because it's adult fantasy is doing pretty well right now compared to the younger categories, at least from what I can tell.
What's the main distinction between adult, young adult? Is it just the amount of swearing and sex and the themes, or
those things? Yes. Also word count.
Oh,
Word count's a big one.
interesting.
So one of the problems I ran into for this first one that we're going to talk about is my word count was too long.
Oh.
It was, I think, mid 90s when for that age group, you wanted to be closer to 60, 70, especially as a first time author. You get much less leeway than someone who's established.
Got it.
Which makes sense. It's frustrating, but it makes sense.
Well, yeah, you kind of notice that with all these authors where their first book does super well. I mean, Harry Potter 1 is 90,000 words.
Something like that.
Yeah, and then you get to Order of the Phoenix and it's 300.
Yeah, it's 800 pages.
Yeah. So since this book is adult, what's the range there? Is it like 90 to 120 is normal? Or?
Yeah, it's a little higher. I think usually, so within it, you have to break it down by, I actually have a word count of successful query letter thing.
Oh, cool.
I found back when I was doing all this and figuring this out. And so if you look at, you want to break it down by age category, and then you also want to break it down by genre.
Mm-hmm.
And those are your two buckets. So if you break it down by adult and then you want horror, for example, average word count for a book that has a successful query, according to this, 97,000. If you do adult literary, 70,000. But if you do adult historical suspense, it goes over 100K.
Interesting.
So it varies largely by both age category and genre.
What's adult sci-fi?
Adult sci-fi. Why do you ask? 108.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
So right around.
I'm at 103. That's perfect. So this time around, well, okay, let's go back to your first querying process.
Yep.
So when did you feel ready to start querying?
Great question. I pretty much never did because it's, when I'm writing a book, it's an infinite project in a way. You can edit it forever. But
never done, just abandoned.
Exactly. And you know how I struggle to share my stuff. I was like that 4 years ago too, shockingly enough. And even more so when it comes to sending it out to agents and people in the industry. It's like, well, okay, if they don't like it, then it's probably don't live in my Google Drive. So really when I started to reach out was people had read it, people had liked it,
Mhm.
and the feedback was more minimal.
Okay.
It was, grammar and things like that, which is important, but not as much as the structure and whatnot
Yeah.
at that point. So then,
How many, sorry if I can interrupt,
Yeah,
how
go
many
ahead.
rounds of editing had you done, or how long had you been working on the book at that point?
I think at the time I was working at EY, long hours. So I wrote it the last year in college and first year at EY, kind of in between those two. So it was probably, 10 to 14 months,
Okay.
somewhere in there.
It's actually pretty
And
quick.
I think 3 to 4 drafts.
Yeah.
I wrote that one quicker than I wrote this one. Or, yeah, I would say that's fair.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think I just felt good about the story.
Hmm.
And it was like, all right, it's time to see if this will go anywhere or not,
Yeah.
basically.
So once did you always want to do this in college?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah, since I was in high school.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What was the first moment you think that made you realize you wanted to try to write a book, write a novel?
I was 11, tried to write a book, turned out to be almost exactly like Aragon. My mom was like, you just copied Aragon.
It's
And
kind of brutal for your mom to say that. You're 11.
yeah, I was like, well, okay. But I think at that time I still knew.
Yeah.
And I would watch like National Geographic, all these things about history, and try to think of how I could turn that into stories and whatnot when I
Cool.
was middle school.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've been working on this for 14 months. The editing
Mhm.
feedback is getting more minimal.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So there's other things you can do at that point other than send it to just friends and family
Yeah.
that I did not do.
Okay.
Like you can, and it's hard to find good editors,
Yeah.
beta readers at that point. It's nice now because I can send things to you and you have that perspective. But at the time, I didn't know anybody else who was crazy enough to try to become an author.
Yeah, that is tough.
So that's difficult. So you can go to, you can either find editors that you pay to read your early drafts, and hopefully they give you the right feedback. There's a give and a take there because if you find someone great, that could be hugely helpful. Also might be very expensive. If you find someone bad, they might screw your book up.
Yeah.
Or just not be as good as the money that you gave them. So that's always a risk, but it can be helpful if you find the right person.
Do you know the price range that you're looking at if you hire an editor?
It's usually on a word count basis. Okay. So if I send somebody a 40,000 word book, it's going to be much cheaper than a 150,000 word book.
Okay.
And almost everybody is on some kind of word count basis there. So it's really just variable based on how long your stuff is.
I asked my agent about this, about getting feedback on the sci-fi novel, and he said it would probably be in the range of like $7,000.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a solid investment.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It really is, especially
Yeah.
when you have no guarantee that you'll get any kind of return on said investment in the long run.
Yeah.
Before you have an agent or anything like that. So my thought process was get the agent and then potentially invest in that before going to publishing houses.
That makes sense.
Whether that's the right choice or not, I don't know. Probably subjective. Depends what editor you find and all that. But that is an option if you want to feel better about where your book is before starting to send it to agents.
There's a lower tier of options too, right? Can't you... There are groups of beta readers on Reddit and stuff that you can tap into,
yes.
right?
Reddit, Twitter, Threads,
Yeah.
Instagram. There are these like communities, and that's probably the second option I was going to get to is just try to force yourself into these groups.
Yeah.
And I did actually have a pretty solid group of 10 to 15 folks who would do that, and
That's
I
cool.
had a few of them read it, and that was one of the things I did too.
How did you find them?
So that was through a contest called Pitch Wars. And essentially, you submit your book to authors who are either agented or have deals, or ideally both. And they'll decide whether to take you on as a mentor or not.
Oh,
And
cool.
I met, I didn't get selected for Pitch Wars, but through the process of applying to it, I met a bunch of other people who applied to it, and a group kind of formed from there.
Neat.
It was mainly through like Twitter group DMs basically, and had a little Slack and all that.
Do you still talk to them?
Sometimes, a few of them actually.
Cool.
Yeah, some of them are still writing, and some of them have gotten deals and agents and all that.
It's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't do this extra round of like hiring an editor and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, you started doing the outreach, or
Yeah,
what came next?
I tried to get into some of these contests, get that feedback from professionals, basically. And then, it's weird going through all this. I feel like I'm remembering new things that I tried and did and all that. So after that, and you start to feel, okay, it's okay. Who the heck do I send this to? Like, I know I have to send it to agents. Who are these agents?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you find them? How do you contact them? My first reaction was go to Twitter, try to find them. And most agents will have a Twitter or Threads or somewhere on the internet that you can find them. They will also probably have DMs turned off unless they follow you back. So otherwise, they would just get a slew of DMs, and they don't want that. So it's good to find them, follow them. They'll post about what they're looking for, whether it's a specific genre or subgenre. They'll post about what to send them, what not to send them, things they really don't like. Because then you're just wasting everybody's time if you send them something that they're basically guaranteed not to like.
Totally.
Like, you wouldn't send somebody your novel if they don't want futuristic sci-fi.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Not going to be a fit.
Right. So then from there, you can like find all these people. So that's one way to do it, is to just go on social and look for literary agents, go on Doodle, do the same thing, and tons will come up. What I'd like to do is just keep a track of name, what they want, email address. You can find their email addresses either on their social profiles or on like their literary agent Doodle. So most of them work within like a literary agent, like an agency, and then that agency's website will have their specific profiles for the agents that work with them.
Cool.
So that's the best place to find them. You can also, and I thought this was super helpful, find usually in the acknowledgments to your book, like, did you include your agent in your acknowledgments? You probably did. So if somebody is working on some kind of nonfiction narrative book, look at Nat's acknowledgments, boom, who's this David guy, Google him, there you go. I did the same thing for fantasy, like middle grade fantasy at that point.
So were you just kind of like shotgun approach, trying to find everybody that you could to
first.
start? Okay.
Yeah. And then after I had a big list, let's say of 100 people, then you start to tier it out. Okay, who are the people that I really, really want? Like, if we sat down tomorrow and they offered me something, boom, sign on the dot.
Yeah.
That's top tier, and then so on and so forth. There's different thinking to this, but for me, it made sense. Okay, I'm going to send this to the people I'm less excited to reach out to first.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not, maybe it's, not about the person, but it's, they haven't represented something that I really loved, or, their, what they want list is a little bit off from what I'm offering, but it's still worth reaching out. That's the type of person to be on that bottom tier. Send it to them. See if you get any feedback that is positive. It's rare that an agent will actually send more than like just a nice response, no.
Yeah.
But if you get any feedback at all, that's a pretty good sign.
Cool.
And then going from there, how do I tweak it, all that good stuff as I progress in those tiers is what I did.
And when you reach out, when you reach out cold like this, what are you sending them?
I can pull it up.
Cool.
So it's a couple things. The different agents will want different stuff, but in general, the 3 parts of a query that you're going to send to a fiction literary agent, if you're a first-time author, is the query itself, which is a less than 1 page, ideally about half a page, very quick, few lines to get them interested in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Compare they call them comp titles. So for me, it'd be like The Magicians and Red Rising.
Cool.
And then those comp titles, you're looking for a style, tone, voice that is similar, as well as you really want something that did pretty well in the marketplace, but you don't want to say like, oh, it's similar to the Hunger Games.
Got it.
Would be, an agent would see that and be like, well, okay.
Yeah.
We're probably not selling 20 million copies of these, but.
Would you put Red Rising? Because that's a sci-fi novel.
So good question. I would make it clear that my novel is fantasy, not sci-fi, but the style is somewhat similar.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And it's a book that has done extremely well, so the agent will know what it is.
Yeah.
It has done well in the market, but it's not, Harry Potter. So it's not like this ridiculous thing that they're getting comps to
it's
at
not
all
Project
times.
Hail Mary.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about like The Will of the Many?
I could say, well, the many style, tone, voice. My book's much shorter. That's a difference. But like the style, the tone.
How long is The Will of the Many?
250,000 words.
No way. It's that long?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So
I can't believe he got that published as the first in a series. I guess he already had book sales.
He's more established as of his first trilogy, or I don't know if it was a trilogy, but his first series.
Yeah.
His first series did pretty well. So I think he had that leniency. And you could argue it's more epic fantasy as well.
Yeah,
or
I guess that's
leading
right.
towards epic fantasy, which is going to have a longer word count.
It didn't feel like 250,000 words.
Which is to his credit.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got the comp titles. What's in that? Like how are you thinking about the description? Is there like a format?
Great question.
Yeah. A formula?
So for me, something I did that was super helpful, because I, at the time, knew nothing about copywriting. And if you think about this, you're not telling your story in that. You're just trying to entice the person that they want to read your story.
Yes.
Those are extremely different skill sets. And this is one of my big problems with query letters is you don't actually see it. Can this person tell a story? It's like, can they get you to want to read their story?
Yeah.
Different
can they write
things.
the cover flap, basically?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can think of, a cover flap is a good comparison for what a query letter is. So I would actually, like if I was going back to tell my 22-year-old self who was doing this what to do, it'd be go study copywriting for a couple weeks before you write this query letter. Just like get decent at it, like understand the basics, and then apply those principles of persuasion to this query letter instead of making it more of just like a summary thing.
That makes sense.
So yeah, the query letter is that. I'll put a couple of examples that I still have in different resources that I used and found helpful.
Cool.
One, I actually worked with a woman named Jane Friedman. Really good. Her website is super helpful. I paid for a full query package, basically tear apart.
Cool.
And it was helpful. So I sent her the query letter that I had drafted. Another thing is called a synopsis.
Okay.
Which is an actual summary of your book, and there's nothing else. There's nothing about you. There's nothing about the word count, the genre, whatever. And then also like your first 3 to 5 pages. So I sent her all that, and she sent a bunch of feedback that was quite helpful. So she was good.
Do you remember how much she charged for that?
I think it was a few $100s.
Oh, that's a great deal.
It might be more now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think she's grown her business quite a bit since then. I don't know if she still offers that service, but she was good.
Cool.
And I'm sure there are other people who do similar work out there.
Yeah,
it's just about vetting them and seeing are they legit or not. If yes, then they can probably help you, especially if it's your first time. So it's like, for example, I'll quickly read through some of the stuff that she sent me. I found that email. So, okay, she broke down the feedback by query, synopsis, and pages. query being that email that you're sending the agent, synopsis being the short summary of your book, and the pages being the actual first couple pages.
Cool.
She goes, I know most query advice says to start with the protagonist, and for good reason. With fantasy, however, this can have the unintended result of causing confusion or lack of tension when we don't understand the context or the universe we're entering. For your work, the backstory is fairly critical, so I've suggested opening the query with a brief sentence stating XYZ about to set the context. Let's see what else is more applicable to everybody. She says the more specific you can be, the better.
What would specific mean in this context?
So she says, I would recommend adding some specificity regarding the relationship between the two main characters and why it might be important for them to get along. Because they did not get along well at all. I recommend when I sent this to her, I didn't have comp titles. She goes, I recommend adding comp titles toward the query's end, authors' titles published within the last few years that would be similar in voice, tone, or style. However, if you can't come up with any, we can leave this out. I think it's probably good to put them in there.
Yeah.
Okay, on the synopsis, she says, I recommend really focusing on emphasizing motivation and cause and effect sequencing.
Okay.
That's quite interesting because, a lot of storytelling theory is about motivations, cause and effect.
Yeah.
So she said the more you can focus on those in your synopsis, the better.
Does the synopsis go through the whole book?
Yes.
Okay, so it even explains how it ends, or
as everything.
Everything.
Not every agent wants a synopsis.
Okay.
The query is different because the query really just includes one or two short paragraphs about your book to make them want to even read the synopsis.
Yeah.
And then is the synopsis interesting enough to make them want to read the pages?
The pages.
Is the flow chart of the order operations, if you will.
The nonfiction proposal is kind of similar. I didn't do a querying process for finding the agent, but in the proposal, you have the 1-page overview of the book.
Yeah.
And then you have a 5 to 10 page deeper dive on the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, you have the full table of contents and then the sample chapter. So there is that similar building up of intrigue as you're going with larger and larger Lego blocks.
And I think it's just designed that way to save agents time.
Yeah.
Which, fair.
Do you have how small are you trying to get it to? Do you come up with a 2-sentence pitch for the book? This is something I've been thinking about, right?
Fair. So for the one that I ended up, that Jane helped edit, it goes, dear, insert agent's name.
Yeah.
Then you can be specific about, so for me, it was a dual POV. So 2 main characters, you bounce back and forth.
Ambitious.
It was ambitious.
Yeah.
You can say single POV, whatever. You're just trying to give them before you jumped into this book, it's from 2 main characters, 5 main characters, 1 main character, whatever. That's all that is. And it said upper middle grade fantasy novel. So what am I doing there? I'm saying what age group it is and then what genre it is.
Mm-hmm.
And in their head, that's going to set certain expectations around, they know what the market likes for word count. They know what the market likes for plots, all that stuff. That tells them a lot. So started with that. And then you're going to give them the title. Is complete at 70,000 words and will appeal to readers who enjoyed the character-driven style of whatever a comp is, with elements of the world building in whatever another comp is.
Cool.
So that's how I laid out.
There's a little bit of it's like Uber for
X
type description.
You're just trying to set the context for the agent. And then you So for a fantasy novel, I told them it is set on present day Earth in XYZ. Just more context.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get into character plot, trying to get them to want to read the thing. So
Cool.
that's the next 3 paragraphs. And by paragraphs, these are fairly short paragraphs.
Okay.
The first one is 3 sentences. The second one's 3 sentences. The third one's 1 sentence.
Can you share any part of it, or do you want to keep it under the hood?
Let's see. The first part tells you about who the first main character is. Her name is Ellie, what her problems are, what she's going through, and kind of that inciting incident. The second paragraph tells you about the second main character. His name is Roland. Same thing. And then I try to get like, how do he and Ellie like come together, interact? What is their conflict?
Cool.
And third, it's like, how do they work together to solve a big problem? Is the structure that I did. And then at the end, it's good to include like a little blurb about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if there's something that makes you either more qualified or whatever to do that kind of thing. If you're writing sci-fi, for example, and you're a nuclear physicist, include that.
That makes sense.
Stuff.
Historical fiction, if you're a historian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You spent the last 3 years going through the ruins of ancient Assyria, include that.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And then just a simple thank you for your consideration. Boom. So it's pretty short. Like the word count on this was 228.
Oh, wow.
So it's very short.
Yeah. Very concise.
Yeah. That's the query. And you can find a bunch of examples on Google of successful query letters to mock yours based off of.
Yeah. So you had your initial list,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just started blasting it out?
Yeah, literally.
Cool.
Yeah. So the important thing is you don't want to disqualify yourself for something silly. So agents mainly want those like query synopsis pages, but some agents don't want the synopsis.
Mm-hmm.
Some agents want 3 pages instead of 5 pages.
So you have to look that up beforehand.
Exactly.
Okay.
You want to, like, if somebody wants your first 3 pages, you send them your first 3 pages. Even if you think page 4 is awesome, you send them your first 3. And if they want to read the rest, they'll tell you. Yeah. So you don't disqualify yourself by not following their instructions, and they'll be super clear about what they want.
Like on their website or...
Exactly.
Cool.
A lot of them don't want links, so send PDFs, things like that.
Makes sense. Yeah. And so what happened next?
Then you wait, and that is
not fun.
Yeah, not fun. A couple of things. One, some agents want submissions through email. A lot of them want submissions through email. Some will want it through the tech called Query Tracker, which is pretty good. You can think about it like the standard application for colleges, where you can find Baylor on there, you can find Florida on there, you can find Clemson on there.
Yeah.
And there might be slight changes between them, but you can just kind of put one thing together, blast it out. That's what Query Tracker is trying to do. So some agents will want that, others want email. So just follow those guidelines. And the agent will tell you on their site or Twitter or wherever you're looking how long it might take to get back. This, like, we're talking months, likely. It's not 10 days.
Damn.
It's, 6 weeks is probably quick.
Wow. Okay.
Which is wild. Some got back to me within a month. Some got back to me after I had completely given up on them, and it was 8 months later, and I was like, I don't even remember who you are.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It is wild.
Is it just sitting in a slush pile until they have some free time to look at it?
And it's not them being lazy or anything like that. They just get so many, and they already have clients.
They already have clients. Exactly. Those are going to be the higher priority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If David's spending all his time going through his slush pile and you need something, you're going to be like, dude, I'm already your client. Come on.
Yeah.
Which made sense, but it can be frustrating from the querying author's perspective.
Totally.
So important to keep in mind. I'll read a reply that I got just so you can see what a standard no is. Okay. I won't say who it's from. Dear Nathan, thank you so much for thinking of XYZ Literary Agency for your submission. Unfortunately, it's not quite what I'm looking for at the moment. I wish I could offer a more personalized response, but do know that we read every query letter and sample we receive. Even though your project is not right for us, it might be for another agent. So don't give up, et cetera, et cetera.
It's pretty nice as
Very
rejections
nice,
go. Yeah.
very standard. That's the kind of thing, if you get that back, it's okay. They read the thing, they took the time to reply, not for them, whatever.
Yeah.
You get 60 of those and it's kind of like, all right, well, this sucks.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing you can expect. It might take a while.
So did anybody ask for the rest of the book?
Nope. So that's called
No one.
requesting a full. That is pretty, it's like 1 to 2% of queries that
Okay.
get fulls requested,
Okay.
which is quite low. They
Yeah.
get a lot.
Yeah.
But I did not have that luck.
Why do you think that is?
I think a couple things. One, my word count was too high.
Okay.
For sure. For that, I think the standard is, let's find it, middle grade fantasy, 53.
Okay.
I
And
was
you were
at
at 70?
70.
Got it.
That might not, 15,000 words, 17,000 words might not seem like a bunch, but on a percentage basis, that's more than 25%.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's what? It's almost 100 pages.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think that helped. I think the dual POV probably didn't help either.
Yeah, it'd be hard to do 2 points of view in 50,000 words.
Yeah. It would be.
I bet it's harder for younger people to follow.
To flip back and
point
forth
of
and
view,
all that
right?
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't think. Yeah, so I think that was a mistake I made. Yeah, I think my query probably could have been, I wasn't a very good copywriter at the time.
Okay.
And it really, I treated it more like a summary than trying to get somebody to
Less
read
like a
the
sales
rest.
pitch.
And less, less like a sales pitch. So I think those things, I don't know. Oh, one other thing. I had a prologue, and agents typically don't like prologues.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because you don't always meet the main character in the prologue. It's usually somewhere else providing some kind of backstory.
Yeah.
And it does seem like this weird thing, because I, as a reader, actually really like
Yeah, me too.
prologues.
Yeah.
I think that's a fairly common thing that readers enjoy, but agents don't like prologues. So I don't think that helped either.
If you have a prologue, do you send the first 3 pages of your prologue or
Great
after
question.
the prologue?
So at first, I was sending the prologue.
Okay.
That was definitely a mistake. Instead, I should have just jumped to the main part of the story and sent those.
Makes sense.
And then if they were interested, be like, oh, surprise, there's a
By the
prologue.
way, yeah.
Or just not even included that until you get the agent. And then you talk to them. Hey, had this idea for a prologue like 8 months before I met you, but
I saw there was a funny thing on Reddit once about prologues, and they were talking about how the writing in prologues is often a lot worse for some reason.
Interesting.
It's like the author is trying too hard to fit a bunch of context into a very small chapter.
And I think that's probably why agents don't like it, is it's a lot of the time, and maybe mine was like this, is just info dumping, background information that you think the reader needs that they don't actually. And if you're a first-time author, that's harder to get away with than if Brandon Sanderson has a prologue.
Totally. Yeah. Miss Warren has a good prologue.
Yeah. It was his, fourth or fifth
Fourth or fifth. Yeah.
So he put out.
He got away with it. Okay, so that's basically where it ended, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And then since then, it's lived on Google Drive. But I think it could potentially be something I'd come back to and make it more adult.
Yeah.
And longer.
I liked the premise when you told me it. Yeah.
So, yeah.
How did that feel?
It sucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is part of the reason that a lot of people who are trying to become fiction authors can become disenchanted
Mm.
with the industry just from talking to people who went through the same process. And you get dozens and dozens of rejections on this thing you spent 8, 9, 10 months, maybe more, maybe years working on.
Yeah.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
And it's, people be like, oh, the agents are looking for this one specific thing or whatever. Like, there's a couple of things. One, for me looking at it, the story could have been better. Like, you asked why I didn't get requests for fulls, why I didn't get an agent. Like, first is probably the story could have been a lot better. That's hard to acknowledge because that means it's like something that you did not do as well on that you could go get better at. And there's a bunch of different ways to respond to that.
Yeah.
I kind of ran away from the industry for a year or two before coming back to it. Not ideal.
Understandable.
But then now it's, okay, how do I just get way better at this skill and just look at it as a skill that you can get better at?
Yeah.
And do better coming around. But it also, it's really tough. So people get disenchanted with the industry and trying to be an author for a lot of those same reasons.
Makes sense.
Which definitely happened to me.
So you kind of got disenchanted and left trying for a year.
Yeah.
And then, because the book that you're 2 years, the book that you're working on now is the third one you've written, right?
Yes, exactly. So
was there another one in between these two?
Yeah, and it was something that I really just never looked at it as something I would put into a market or try to get agents or anything. I didn't want that pressure again. I just wanted to be like, can I just do this again and just enjoy it?
Do it for you.
Get back to just like enjoying it instead of trying to think about making something for this mass market appeal.
So this is the first serious reattempt.
Exactly.
So what are you doing differently?
Great question. First, following the word counts. So it'll be between 90 and 100,000, which is slightly lower than a lot of adult fantasy. That's on purpose. I think if you are a first-time author, agents might tell you differently, but if I'm an agent and I see something that is slightly lower, to me that, it could mean a lot of things, but it means, okay, maybe they took more time to edit out the stuff. I always think for me, I always want people to want more instead of less.
Yeah.
If somebody tells me, I think you could add XYZ, that's better than, hey, these 15,000 words are kind of boring, maybe cut them out. So I think erring on the lower side of the word count is probably actually the way to go. Like, you don't want to be 30% less, but if you're 5 to 10% less, I think that's a good thing. So doing that. Second, just really focusing on the story itself, and making something that people want to read and enjoy and read more of, and how, like, focusing on that craft.
Yeah.
Really.
What does that look like in actual practice? Is it like everything that you do on World Builders, like studying storytelling?
That's a lot of it. And that's why I write that newsletter. It's, hey, these are things I'm learning, and this is what I've seen make these other things so effective, and how I'm trying to apply them to my work, and how you might be able to apply them to your work too.
Cool.
Because that's the best place to learn. I think there's two ways to get good at anything, and I think it's best if you combine them. First being to study people who are really good at said thing.
Yeah.
And two, practice. And if you combine those, you'll probably improve.
Probably.
So that's
we
all.
We should do an episode more focused on that as well.
And I like to do these like story teardowns where I'll take something and figure out the high level structure that was used, and then on a scene by scene basis what they're doing to make it as good as it is.
Cool. Yeah. And then what about for the actual querying process?
So the query, if you're doing a cold query process where you don't have any warm intros to
Yeah.
agents. You can do it the way that I did, or you can try to make it warm.
Okay.
And so I'm going to try to make it warm. How do I actually get to know these people and then send them the stuff? There's a few ways to go about this. One that I think is interesting is different conferences and things like that.
Oh.
I don't mind traveling, going, doing that. Some are virtual as well, so cost is an issue. Then the virtual ones could be better. And there's a fee to be in, to be there. It's $100 or something for a lot of these.
Are these like pitch conferences?
Some of them can be. Some there are, like for this last one, I did this one and it was like I forget exactly what it was called, but like Colorado pitch something or another. Let's see. It was a Colorado writing workshop, and they brought in different agents, editors, things like that, and they would do live critiques of queries from people who had signed up. Then you would get to, meet different agents and things like that. So I'm trying to do a lot more of those this time.
Cool.
Because you talk to somebody face to face, it's way different than just getting an email.
Yeah.
And if they share you're interested and they still want a query letter or whatever from you, you say, we met at XYZ place.
Yeah.
That's so much better than, hey, I'm a random person on the internet. Hope you like my book.
Totally.
Stuff like that.
What about trying to connect with people on Twitter or
For sure.
Threads or?
Yeah. The challenge is, and probably will always be, is unless those people follow you,
Yeah.
you can't just
probably
DM them.
Yeah.
And I love DMing people. I DM people all the time.
Totally.
But then it's, are there people I know who have agents?
Yeah.
If that person reads the draft and they think it's solid, they'll probably send it to their agent. You've done that with a lot of people for nonfiction.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Cool. And does I didn't ask this question, but I'm curious about it. How does your email list and your audience factor into the query letter? Do they look at that? Like, do they care?
So it's a great question. If they don't care, I think they should.
Yeah, they should. Yeah.
But I'll probably include it right at the top.
Yeah. Why not? Right?
Why not? Because at least the way I'm thinking about it, I will make the assumption that there are a fair amount of good books being queried.
Yeah.
Like people have written good stories. I've made that assumption. I think that's a fair assumption. And they're going to be sending these to the same agents.
It's sort of not enough to be good.
Right. So then where does the comparison go? You're looking at, and if you think about the agent, their incentive is sign authors who can make them more money. I think it's that simple.
Yeah.
Like you can add all these other things if you want, but at the end of the day, do you believe this book and this person can sell the book?
Yeah.
Make the revenue. And I think that comes down to product, book, and distribution. And if you as the author have a lot of distribution, I would argue that's an advantage
Totally.
and a differentiator. So I'll definitely include I think they probably mainly care about the newsletter.
Yeah, that seems like it would be the
my
most
guess,
valuable.
because the overlap is pretty solid. And I've had a lot of newsletter readers reply that, they're writing different things. They love reading these same kind of books, stuff like that.
Cool.
So I'll include, I have XYZ numbered newsletter subscribers directly related to the art of story.
Yeah. Do you know if there are any agents on your email list?
I should actually just plop that at the top of the next newsletter.
Yeah.
And see. There might be.
There
Who
might
knows?
be. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
They're probably published authors, people who have agents.
That I know there are those.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah.
They've reached out on Twitter and
That's cool.
whatnot. Yeah.
Anything else you think is worth mentioning here that we didn't get to?
I think I'll include some of these resources that I found helpful, examples of query letters that were successful.
Yeah.
That's probably, the best place to start is find query letter that was successful. How can you learn from that and model after that? and just any other resources and whatnot that I found and used and thought were good. And we can do a follow-up, like maybe mini episode if I get an agent
Oh,
this
yeah.
time around.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do a follow-up on that.
Yeah. Do you have
Awesome.
any other things you can think of that were
I
curious?
had all the questions I had.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think
That's it.
we'll share that resource on the site that has the newsletter, which is betweendraftspod.com. Got to finish setting that up, but it'll be up by the time you hear this. And I think, what should we do next week? Next week, did you want to do building an audience?
Sure.
Or or we could do editing, since we're talking.
Editing would be interesting.
Let's talk about editing next week.
Yeah, because I've been a lot of editing mistakes that.
Yeah, editing would be a really good one to do next week.
Let's
And
say
like
editing.
how we've refined our process and
Yeah.
how we work together and work with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that'll be really good.
Let's
Cool.
do that.
All right. Well, if you're not subscribed, then please do. We're on YouTube, obviously, Between Drafts, any podcast player you can find us. I'm Nat Eliason on Twitter.
Nathan Ball 27 on Twitter.
And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.